Thanks, Jenny. So hi, everyone. My name is Liz Harkins. I am the other half of the membership at large at DAD with Jenny. And I'm really excited to see all of you. I know Jenny, Megan, and I have put these together, and a thank you to our panelists, Ginevra, Jamie, and Jordan, for joining us. So today we're going to talk about how to establish an independent research agenda outside of your dissertation and the mentorship that comes with that process. So please feel free to jump in with questions. You can raise your hand and unmute, or you can throw them in the chat. So we'll see how the conversation goes today. I have 4 questions that will guide us. And then if there's time at the end, we can do breakout rooms, but we'll see how that goes, if it makes sense to do that, or if we can continue as the full group. So I want to turn it over to our panelists, and I will call on you, but hopefully you can introduce yourselves to us with your name, your role and your rank, and what your research interests are. So Ginevra, can we start with you?
My name is Ginevra Courtade. I am a professor in special education now at the University of Louisville. I am also the current president of DADD for a couple more months. Let's see, my research interests are around teaching academics to students with moderate severe disabilities and training teachers to do that. I forgot what else you asked me already. You're muted.
Yeah, that was it. Your who you are and what your interests are right now.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Jamie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jamie Pearson. I am an assistant professor of special education at North Carolina State University, and my research interests are around supporting ethnically diverse families of children with autism, facilitating partnerships between professionals, educators, and families, and I'm also a behaviorist by training, so supporting children with challenging behavior. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
And Jordan, last but not least.
Hi, I'm Jordan Shurr. I am Associate Professor of Special Ed at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, Canada. And my research interests are, this is gonna come out, and I try to say them concisely, but it's really eclectic is a nice word to say it. But you can say curriculum supports and interventions for students with significant support needs, and professional development for teachers in that area as well.
Great, thank you. So the first question is, how did you start to build your interest research outside of that dissertation process? So if it's okay with you, we'll go in the same order and start with Ginevra.
So I built on the research I had done for my dissertation. So my dissertation and the work that I was doing as a doctoral student at UNC Charlotte, all of that work was around teaching academics. So I had worked on a grant that was around teaching early literacy skills. I worked on a grant around math and science, and then my dissertation was on science. So I wanted to continue that. Obviously, I had put a lot of time into that already. My first job when I graduated, I went to West Virginia University. And I didn't have the colleagues there that had the same interests that I did, which was a little hard. So the department chair was, her specialty area was moderate severe disabilities, but that she wasn't doing, she wasn't doing that type of research. And then another colleague specialized in autism, but it was more connected with early childhood. And so I had to keep working, not that I had to, but I had the opportunity to still work with my professors at UNCC and to kind of keep building on what we had already been doing. And then I had the opportunity to do some research in the local school districts there using the ELSB, which came out of one of the studies that we had done when I first started my doctoral program. But I just found that I wasn't able to really get my research off the ground the way I wanted to. So I had the opportunity to take a job here, and had a great opportunity to work across the state in the area that I had started researching in. So I kept it going. I was at West Virginia for 2 years. I also worked with another colleague on some PBIS work, and I added in a severe component, but that wasn't really the area that I wanted to go down. It was just what I could do at the time. So I did take another position that allowed me to continue the research around the academic piece.
Great, thank you. And that actually, the kind of the follow-up question to that was, what were some challenges that you had to address when you started? And you referenced some of those. Were there other specific things that you did to specifically address those strategies other than looking for more opportunities that closely aligned?
I made friends with the people in the curriculum department. And they actually helped me get into some schools. So that was helpful. But yeah, I just kept working with people that were outside of West Virginia that I had already started working with, just to keep that research going. And I'm glad that I had the opportunity there, but then I also had the opportunity to leave, because I think that I may have started to stray away from what I wanted to do. If I had stayed there, I think I would have tried to find another niche, which isn't really what I wanted to do. But that's a different story. So
that's, yeah, a different webinar.
It is a different webinar. Yeah.
Great. Jamie, same question for you. How did you start to build your interests and areas of expertise outside of your dissertation?
Sure. So my dissertation was an intervention study. So I developed a parent training, a 6-week parent training for Black families of children with autism. And so to answer your question directly, I have not been able to really separate myself from FACES, because that's kind of my baby. So a lot of my work really does still stem from the parent training intervention. But one thing I will say that has helped me think a little bit outside of that and to be able to expand my research agenda is tapping into some of the opportunities that I've had at NC State as a junior faculty in terms of internal funding and in terms of technological partnerships on campus. So at State, as some of you probably know, it's a very tech-savvy campus, lots of engineering experts on campus. And so there have been a couple opportunities for me where I was able to partner and get internal funding that supported me in thinking about special education and thinking about autism and thinking about families in really cool ways, right, outside of my traditional FACES research. And so one of those was with a Catalyst grant from our Friday Institute, which is a partnered institute to our College of Education. And we were able to design a module. So that module was also around supporting ethnically diverse children with autism, but it helped me to think about what does it look like to be able to scale this up and to make this accessible across the nation. Another opportunity that some of you learned about this week and maybe knew a little bit about before was a partnership that I did with our Distance Education Center. They also offered internal grants. And so when I first got there, I was this is my 4th year at State. So when I first got there, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna jump on all of these internal awards. And so it was really cool that I had an opportunity to partner with our Distance Ed Center called Delta. And we developed an IEP meeting in 3D virtual reality. And so that gave me an opportunity to really tap a bit more into the teacher preparation, which I've had interest in, but didn't always fit perfectly with the FACES work that I've done. And so I'm sort of in that phase now and thinking about how do I expand my research specific to teacher prep and what does that look like within the context of supporting culturally, ethnically diverse families. So those are 2 ways that I've expanded the work beyond the FACES program. And so I'm still kind of thinking about that and tapping into those opportunities to do different and exciting work.
Great. Were there any specific challenges that you faced as you started to kind of branch out? sounds like you were able to branch out in the way that you wanted, but did anything come up at that time that you had to problem solve through?
Honestly, one of the things I'm thinking about now, I'm looking up because my board is here with all the projects and papers I'm working on. When I started doing those other sort of branching out, I had to think about it from a research perspective. Like, am I doing this for knowledge and development? Is this professional development, or am I also collecting data? And that's the phase that I'm in now, right? With this module, and also with our virtual reality IEP, thinking about next steps from a research perspective. So I guess not a challenge necessarily. I think it's possible, but I also need to, manage the number of things that are on my plate. So I think just kind of balancing all of those would be something that I'm keeping in mind and thinking about how to do moving forward.
Great, thank you. And Jordan, same question. How did you start to build your research interest outside of the dissertation process, and if there were any challenges that came up and how you addressed them?
Sure. I think the main thing, and this was actually started in my doctoral program from my advisor, made me or encouraged me to keep a research journal. So, as you're reading something, you think, hey, that's a great idea. You can write it down. I'm the type of person who, like, I think it's hard for me to move on. If I think I have a good idea, I want to do it right now. And that's, if you all probably know, that's not the best approach if you want to actually finish something, to continually start new things. So that had helped me. I honestly don't use it as much anymore, but I probably need to get it back out. But that was the idea where her advisor had taught her this, where you just you're writing all the ideas you come up with them as they come up with. And then if you have a moment where you're just you don't have anything, or there's a grant coming up and you don't know what to do, you go back to your journal and you can kind of look for ideas you've had before. And when she was done with one, she'd fold it over. That was kind of like a successful moment to do that. So I think it was helpful, just because I mentioned earlier that my I could call it eclectic, and that I don't seem to focus. I don't know if it's part of it is tenure. I mean, you have a little bit more latitude to pursue your interest in. Part of it was the university I was at before had pretty clear standards, and and you could really map them out and know exactly what you need to get that mark. And then from there, you can have fun. So I think that those two, the context really matters. I would say on that note, I think it's really helpful. Not every university is really clear on what the expectations are for promotion and tenure, but some are actually a lot clearer than you'd think. So I think that recognizing that you're doing two things. One is, pursuing knowledge, beautiful, lofty goal. The other is pursuing job security. There's two sort of things that you're doing at the same time, and it's okay to think of those two things. And one thing I would say is to kind of lay the groundwork for what's the job security part, because you want to get to the point where you see an interesting project and you can run with it. Maybe it's a longitudinal study, or maybe it's something that's going to take some time and not show some fruit, but that should be the ultimate goal, that we're able to pursue something for the sake of interest and maybe the perfect timing. Things kind of lay on at the same time. So going back to the question of how did I start, I think my problem is I might have too many ideas and I don't see things through. So that's not, coming up with ideas isn't the problem. It's the finishing them is the problem. And challenges are related to that, finishing things. And I think that, deadlines are helpful. If you submit something for a conference presentation, you would never not be prepared for a class, but it's the publication submission is the hard part. So I think that's the same thing with that, force deadlines on yourself, conference presentation, a special issue of a journal or something like that has a date, a book chapter or something like that. And I think that can help. That's general writing in general, but I think that also helps get a line across as well, I think. But I might be not a good one to talk about, having a really defined line of research. So I think some others probably have that better than I do.
Great, thank you. Ginevra, you actually alluded to this earlier, but how do you manage those invited projects outside of your area? And even thinking of what Jordan just said about piecing out job security versus research interests and areas of expertise. Do you have any tips about managing that piece as a newer faculty?
Yes. I think going back to what Jordan said, it's tough to, some universities do have really clear guidelines, and those are so nice. I've seen them, and we do not. We have these nebulous, they will not put a number on it. They will not, it's just, it's hard. And so what I did when I got to U of L was look at, I talked to other people who had recently gotten tenure to see, kind of what that bar was. And I had very good mentors at U of L. So what they did was they helped me make the contacts that I needed in the state to start that research line that I wanted to go down back up. And so I'm glad that I wasn't in a position where I had to say, I really like this university, but I can't find anybody to help me with this research. And so even though like some of my mentors, they're learning and behavior disorders, they're not necessarily in moderate severe, but they help me break through to get the contacts that I needed in the state. And then you mentioned external projects. So are you talking about, what do you mean exactly?
I guess invited projects that maybe are outside of what you would want to focus on. So not necessarily external, but external outside of your research interests or wanted areas of research.
Right. So I think when you're very early in your career, you say yes. I still do all the time. I have a running joke with one of my colleagues that, I never say no, and it's pretty bad. But at the beginning, I do think even if it's outside of your direct research line, it could be, kind of have to pick and choose, like, is it somebody at the university, that you're at, where they can help you, maybe break into a new group, or, somebody in the State Department or whoever it is. But you do have to be careful, especially when it's not leading to peer-reviewed publications or presentations. But it's a fine line, because you don't want to say no to someone and they may never ask you again. So that is actually a really good question for a mentor that's in your field. So I could say to, I could go back to Diane Browder and say, is this something that I should take on? And, it depends on who the person is that is inviting you, because you need to, build those relationships and make those connections. But at the same time, there are some projects that you put a lot of time into, and service work too. But again, I digress. But that is not getting you what you need to build your vita to make a really great case for your tenure.
Great. Thank you. Jamie, I saw you nodding emphatically when she was talking about saying yes to projects. So what are some tips that you have about managing those projects outside of what you'd like to focus on?
Yeah, so when Ginevra was talking, I was like, yeah, that's definitely me. Like, I still have not learned to say no enough. And I agree, like, as junior faculty, you're really sort of trying to get your footing, right? And you're thinking about, how do I carve my space? How do I get enough grants? How do I get enough publications? And so one of the things that I have had to do, and I'll preface this by saying at NC State, I am one of a very few, like maybe 2 or 3 people who do autism-related research. Others sort of do it, I guess, well, definitely not within the context of education. And so, since I've been there, I kind of get not tons, but quite a few emails to collaborate on projects. And so for me, I've had to ask myself like 4 critical questions, and I put these over here so I don't forget. The first is like clarifying the purpose of the project or the partnership, right? So like, what is the goal here? What are the expected outcomes? What are the expected deliverables? And then identifying my potential for contribution. And so this is a big thing where I really have to sit back and think about, is this a good fit? How can I contribute? And can my knowledge and expertise match what you're expecting in a partner or from a partner? But also, what are the benefits for me? So similarly, like, is this potential for grant funding? Is this potential for scholarly publications? And then, is this just an overall good fit? So one example of that, I might have shared this in our previous session, was an invitation from some colleagues to work on an NSF proposal around geospatial in science. Like, I know nothing about geospatial science, but it was specific to adolescents on the autism spectrum. And I was like, okay, that's more in my wheelhouse. Like, let's think about what this partnership means. And it turned out that really my contributions are pretty specific to the research design itself and not so much to the project around developing and building these drones, because I don't know how to build drones. And so we're thinking about it more from an instructional design perspective and supporting the needs of the students on the spectrum. And so having that conversation really helped both me and my partners say, okay, we think this would be a good fit, and these are the potential outcomes, these are the deliverables. But I think if you're quick to say yes, you really do want to just take a second to pause. And I completely empathize and understand how easy it is to want to say yes so that you can kind of get your name out there and get more scholarly publications and grants under your belt. But it's important to kind of weigh the pros and cons of those opportunities.
Great, thank you. And Jordan, do you have anything to contribute about how you've managed those invited projects outside?
I always say no first, and then if they come, I'm just joking. No. Just joking. Say no first, and if they come back, then it's really important. No, I think Jamie and Ginevra, I follow their advice. One of the things I would add is that, like, I think it's important, especially newer faculty, just to have this mindset. Whenever you add something to your life, you have to give something up. It has to take the place of something else, because most of us aren't watching Netflix all day. Like, if you are, you need to let me know how you work that out, because I want to get in on that deal. But most of us are pretty full. So whenever you say yes to something, you're inadvertently, oftentimes we're lying to ourselves, but we're inadvertently saying no, or allowing ourselves to half do something that we've already committed to. So I think it's really important to, like Jamie said, to pause. And part of the pause should be, okay, this sounds great. What's in it for me? What's the outcome? Who's the group? All that. But what is this how long is this gonna be? What's the time commitment? And is there anything I can get rid of right now? Can I knock something off my plate? It may be yes, but not until next month. It may be yes, but I need a slow roll into this or something like that. I think oftentimes when I do find myself in a bind, it's because I've chased the shiny object without thinking about what I'm already committed to right now. And the other questions I was thinking, like Jamie had that nice list of questions. Mine are a little bit clunkier, but maybe a little bit more brash. You're much more polite, I think. In my mind, I think, who's leading it and what's their track record? Do they publish? There's somebody specifically in my life, a very special person, that when they ask me to do something, I always say yes, because they are, many of you know this person, because they don't mess around. I'm slow, I'm bad with timelines, but they're one of the few people who can crack the whip and get me going. And I don't want to disappoint this person. So I know that there will be a publication, and it will be soon, and it will be good. So when that person asks, I don't care if it's like on robots or whatever the case may be, as long as I can find a place and I know what they want me to do, I'm in. But there are other people that, like, I've been on projects too with when I was newer faculty member, I've been on projects with other people who are newer, and it kind of like, we're all too polite and nobody was leading. And those are the things that really just kind of spun out of control. And you could be 3 years, 4 years in the project, and it gets convoluted because you don't know, like, everybody, we're tired at that point. There's nothing to show for it. So I think that too, like having those frank conversations, what do you want me to do? What do you expect? What do you think I can bring to this project? Like kind of interview the people who are asking. So yeah, why do they want me? What am I giving up? I think that's it.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Ginevra, I'm sorry.
Both Jamie and Jordan mentioned things that I think are really important. It's knowing the time commitment and knowing what your role is. Because I think that sometimes, and I do this quite often, I don't ask those questions. And then I end up something that I thought might have been a smaller role. It ends up taking more time, or the role isn't what I thought it was. And so I think those are really good questions to ask up front. On top of, what's the benefit for me? It's really important. It needs to benefit you, especially when you're pre-tenure.
Great, thank you. At this point, I wanted to kind of open it up to the group and see if anyone had specific questions for our panelists that they wanted to ask for the good of everyone. Well, you guys solved all of the problems with this in the first half hour. Look at that. So the next question is something that has either worked well for you in the past or is something new that you want to try out, which I know you've kind of alluded to some things already. Oh, we do have a question. Do you have any recommendations specifically for qualitative leaning researchers? I'll let the panelists, I'm not sure which one of you could jump on that, especially in terms of how special education is heavy in quantitative. That is a good point. Jamie, I see you've unmuted.
Yeah, I was sort of thinking through. So I guess my original answer was a bit more logistical because one of the strategies I was planning to share was around building a research team. And so, I do mixed methods research, but I'm pretty heavy on qualitative work, especially just given the nature of the work that I do and kind of unpacking some of the experiences. But I've learned in these first few years, like I've collected a ton of data and I don't have enough support to get through it. And so you really have to think about, do I have the knowledge and expertise on my research team, and or do I have the ability to train my research assistants to be able to dig through this qualitative data. And so I have like 40 interviews right now that we've been slowly crawling through. So I think that's important just in terms of logistics, right? Thinking about how do I manage data collection and data analysis for qualitative projects. In special ed, I think this is an important piece. And I remember being in my graduate program and sort of having to not argue for my dissertation, but really pointing to the importance of listening to the voices of people who have gone unheard for so long in the autism community, right? And so I think it's just important to remember like why you're doing the work that you're doing, and to know that it's okay, right, to engage in work that may be a little bit outside of your wheelhouse, or maybe puts you in, maybe with which you're a little bit uncomfortable, if you know that the purpose of that matches. And so one of the things I always share with my students and with other collaborators is that I let my research question guide my methods. If my research question determines that I need to do a qualitative study, then that's what I do. And so I think keeping that in mind has really helped me to sort of sort through that and get through some of the sticky feelings we sometimes have, like when, like my advisor only does single case design. So I felt like a little bit of an outcast when I was the only one out of my cohort who didn't do a single case design for dissertation. But I think keeping that piece around, do my research questions match my methods is helpful.
Great, thank you. I don't know, Jordan or Ginevra, if you have any insights on the qualitative piece.
I would say, so I'm in a school that's single. I'm in the minority here. Single subject is not a thing where I am. I mean, it is, but it's not. It's it's quite different. I'm in a qualitative world, heavily qualitative, and not only qualitative, but we're talking like capital Q qualitative, using music as a lens to interpret or to show data. I mean, just some really innovative things. So, and kind of what Ginevra, and I echo both of what they had said earlier about like getting in touch with other colleagues and like having that network that's outside. So I'm in a non-departmentalized faculty. It's all education, quite broad. And that's helped me methodologically be thinking more broadly, because like I said, I can do my thing and I can have my area, but I also have contact all the time with people who are in totally different areas. So that helps me broaden my idea. And I think on top of that, and the other question, I mean, qualitative is about people and connections. And one of the things that I did in my last job and this job right now, the first year or two, is to maybe you set aside some money to buy coffee cards or something like that, but just go meet people without asking them for anything. I think the first thing, the important thing is meet them, let them get to know you. I mean, some people are better at this than I am, where they can call the phone and meet them and ask for something at the same time. But I always find it's better if you can kind of create this buzz in your community. If it's especially a small town, you've met this person, they know each other. They say, hey, did you know, that's how these things can really help propel you towards relationships. Because people, it's a small, if you're in severe disabilities, it's going to be a small world wherever you go. So you just start meeting people, figuring out who else you should meet, and just get to know them, what they do, and then you can kind of you have better speed to get to those contacts, I think.
Great. That's actually a great segue to the next question, is what have you done to make connections to local school districts and or families of children with ASD? And I'll even add on top of that, especially given the pandemic that we're experiencing, I imagine is a huge barrier right now to making those connections. Ginevra, I see you've unmuted. Would you like to tackle that one first?
Sure. So those are the opportunities that you say yes to. So if you have a colleague who works closely with the local school district, and they say, hey, do you want to go to this school? Yes, you do. You want to go to that school. You want to go to this state meeting. You want to meet this person at the autism center, or whatever it is. Even if that person is not, you know, directly in your research line, you just want to make those connections. So I had the opportunity to work on a statewide grant. Well, that was great. You know, I have connections all over the state now. And some of that actually started in my doctoral program. I did a lot of work at the state level. And so I could kind of speak that state level speak and transfer that with me to a new district. It is very hard right now. So I'm working with a new cohort of doc students, and we can get into some schools that are 3 hours away from here, but they're about to close down again. So it's been very hard. So that connection piece is, it's difficult, but it's still, I think, still the opportunity to be on local community committees, or just to go out and meet people at a community event, maybe that I keep saying the local autism center, because we have a really strong training center, but they do community events. So to go out maybe and be a part of that, get out and introduce yourself, even across colleges, that was very eye-opening for me. I joined a university-wide committee, and I met people in all different colleges that I may not have known before. And so there could be a partnership with someone in another college that does work, you know, for social work, for example. They're in the schools. So, you know, it's a matter of being, saying yes to those types of meetings and committee service, but then also, and it just depends on your personality. Some people will walk up to anyone and introduce themselves. And I wasn't very good at that when I started my career, and I'll just do it now because it's important. And so sometimes it's just a matter of saying your name over and over again, and that, you know, you're a new professor at so-and-so, and this is your area, and if I could ever help you, and get your business cards out.
Great, thank you. Jordan or Jamie, do you have any tips about that connection? And Jordan, you already kind of mentioned a little bit about the community outreach, but any other ideas about how to get out there and make those connections to local districts and communities? Jamie?
So I've had a number of interesting opportunities because I work so closely with families. I've actually been connected to some of our local districts through parents. So either going in as an advocate in an IEP meeting or just like maybe them introducing me to the teacher. And so that's been, I think, a really different way to build partnerships with the districts, but we've also, it's been very positive in that parents are typically excited to like introduce us and we have conversations around how to support the student. I've also connected with some of my colleagues who have, like my mentor at NC State has a very rich history. She's been here for like 44 years now with the school districts. And so anytime, sort of like what Ginevra mentioned, if she mentions, I want you to meet this person in this district, I'm like on it. So really just taking advantage of those opportunities, even just to connect and meet, new people across the school districts here in North Carolina. So that's definitely still something I'm working on, is building partnerships in the schools, particularly because a lot of my work is not necessarily inside the school, but taking advantage of those opportunities through other colleagues or through the parents that I support has been very helpful.
And I was just thinking about, if I could jump into three things that I was thinking about that are helpful too. And I think that the thing that when somebody's been there for a while, a lot of times it's their former students that can get them in. But that takes a while, right? It takes a while to get your former students into the school and to be comfortable enough to take on something extra and receive the principal. So that can take some time. But in the meantime, I think there's two other things that we can do. And one is, I think there's a name for it, but I don't know what it is. I mean, you could call it service learning or something like that, where your class projects are extensions out in the community. So last year, I think it was last year, I had a class that had a really big emphasis on UDL. So the final capstone project was, we recruited from our alumni and from our student teachers and the community in general, lesson plans from teachers, and then we reviewed them and then sent in small groups, and the students gave feedback back. So that was like a way to kind of, like we built a whole a web page around this, and it became like a thing. That leads into my second idea of marketing. Professors are usually the worst self-marketers there, because it seems dirty. It seems like a weird thing to do, but there's nothing like looking at a slick web page that's clear and tells you what you need to know. And like the business cards are important, but I think even like a web page, look this up, and then you can always update it when you want. You can put information. It can, we don't like to brag about ourselves, but if you have publications that relate to that, it's hard to say that in a conversation, but somebody can look it up on for themselves if you have a place to do it. And on that note too, a big thing at my university right now, and it seems like this is kind of a thing in special ed that's catching on in general, that maybe from the sciences where people are making their own research groups. And really what that means is, instead of saying, here's my research, you're making it, you're legitimizing something that's already there. You're putting a stamp or marketing something that's already there. I know Jenny's got you've got a brand, you have a thing, and I think that brand can take you places that you as a person, it's harder to get into, because you think of consumers, practitioners, the school world, they're used to brands, they're used to packages, and individual professors not getting that, I think you can kind of limit your exposure. So, I made a website earlier when I was looking for jobs, just because I could update my Vita earlier, because it was really tiny. So if I had any one thing, I could add it right at this time and it would go straight to the people. But I kept that up, and it's a good way to get your message out there, and I think that helps with the community and engagement that way.
Great. Jenny, not to put you on the spot, but I'm about to. Jordan mentioned that you have figured this out. Could you describe a little bit about the brand that you've put forward and what that looks like?
I don't know if I figured it out, but So actually this came from Julie Thompson. So Julie, when we both started our tenure track jobs at the same time, and she's at A&M and I'm at Florida State. And I saw on her email signature, it said Blink Lab. And it was this cutest little icon. I was like, oh, I want that. And I was like, what's a lab? And she told me that centers are official. Centers have money, but labs are not. And like Jordan said, in the hard sciences and in psychology, they always say, well, who's your lab? And so I'm coming into Florida State, which is very much a hard science university, and working with like the Florida Center for Reading Research and the psychology people there, they have labs. So I realized to legitimize myself. So I just made it up. It's a general curriculum access lab, and I call myself the director. That's all just made up, but I have a lab manual. I have, now that I have my first doc student, who then was my postdoc and is now gone, I'm realizing this lab is not institution specific. It's a research group. And once you like move on, now you're an associate director, because that's what they do in the hard sciences. That's what FCRR does. So yeah, we have a website that needs to be updated, but we have social media, and I have an undergrad intern who is, has nothing to do with special ed, but he's very enthusiastic about Twitter and Instagram, and he tried to teach me. I was like, how about you just do it for me? Because I don't really need to learn. I just need other people. And so part of what it has helped me when I first started into a place to formalize and legitimize what I was doing and to give it a structure, because I realized coming out of Charlotte, where I was in a very established lab, essentially, and then I came somewhere new, I was like, oh, you have to make that. And being an early person, it's exhausting to do all the just mentoring yourself. And I was lucky to have doctoral students to work with, and undergrads and master students, but it's tiring. So by formalizing it, I then created hierarchies, not so there's people below you, but so there's people who are above you that aren't me. And so that you then move up and mentor the people below you. So, because really, when you have grants and students, you're running a small business of sorts. And I don't know about you, but I got no training in like management and mentoring and grant budgets and all of that. So creating the lab was the first start to sort of organizing all of that. But I made it up, and you can too.
And can I just say too that students love their roles. I mean, it's great for a student to have a director role on their vita, or a communications manager. I mean, I don't know if you always have to pay them, but you know, you'd love to, but if you have the money, you can. But I think that they love the roles.
They do. Yeah, I've had awesome undergrads through my university's undergraduate research program, and one of them, I take that back, one of them was a special ed major, but everyone else are like random other things, and they have other talents to bring. And so it goes to Jamie's, you also then use the lab setting to mentor and teach. So those lab meetings are teaching times every week of like think alouds and brainstorming and supporting each other and all of that. So yeah, I highly suggest it. It also builds in accountability. And like Jordan said, sometimes we have to create accountability systems for ourselves.
Yeah, my lab has definitely become like my own accountability system, and very similar to Ginny. Like I got to State and just sort of, I was like, okay, I need to create this space. I was fortunate in that when I came to State, they also gave me a physical space just off campus to actually house my FACES lab. And so that was also helpful, like to have our own space. And I think I agree that, you know, it brings in, I've had students from all sorts of disciplines like, hey, Dr. P, I want to join your lab. And I always chuckle a little bit. I'm like, okay, of course, like, come on. But it's like, you do realize that I also just made this up, but they're great. They're awesome. And one of the questions I think was like thinking about projects outside of your area. And one of the things that's been really valuable for me, and I hope for the students that I've worked with, is that we find ways to infuse their own interests in the work that we're doing with FACES. And so it's not always directly related. There's one student I'm thinking about who's now getting her master's degree in nutrition, but she was interested in autism and diet, right? So like she did a literature review, and we know there's not a whole lot of evidence-based research around that. But so she is able to do a literature review around that, and then other students who have sort of connected interests, and it helps me to think more about work outside of just my area around families and autism. Helps me to read literature outside of those areas. And so I think really building on the strengths of your students within that research program is really helpful for sure.
Thank you. We have a question in the chat about Dr. Courtade struggling with her first institution because her colleagues didn't do research in her area. It's a great question. How important is that when considering searching for a job? And then I'll add again, during COVID times, right, too, where there's, I think, maybe a heavier balance to consider. But Ginevra?
So when you are searching for a job, timing is always terrible, because it's not like every job gets posted, October 1st. You might see a job that, you like, you haven't even defended your dissertation yet. And then another job comes out afterward, and it's a terrible timing thing. So I did narrow down what I was looking for, and it needed to be, Jordan mentioned this before, because severe disabilities is such a small field. There are a lot of places that don't have a program in severe disabilities. So that narrowed things down immediately. I also wanted to be at a research one. And so in looking for jobs, there were just a couple of them that came up when I was looking for a job. And I applied to, I can't remember, it's been a long time. I applied to at least 2 places, and both of them, again, research one, good severe disabilities program. I didn't get one of the jobs that I wanted that did have some more people that were, I think, closer in my field and in my research field. But what I did do, and it is important to look at, but it's also important to not narrow down too far, because then you may not have a job. So what I did get from this, from the first position though, was I didn't get into schools as much as I wanted to. I had come from, working with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, which was a huge district, to going to the schools in Morgantown, and there's only, I don't know, not very many schools in that district. But what I got from my department chair there was networking at the national level. She was very well networked. And so I went to conferences with her that I hadn't been to before. And I met all of these researchers that were outside of the area of severe disabilities. And they got me into other projects. And so it is important, but also you still get the experience, the teaching experience. And for me at West Virginia, we taught classes online, which I had practiced with one class when I was in my doctoral program. So that was very different. So I got the opportunity to do that. But yeah, it is important for you to look for people that are in your research area, but then you never know what you can build just having good colleagues. So just don't narrow yourself down too far.
I just want to add to that, and Jordan, I'll throw it your way, but another question is just expanding on any tips for postdocs on the job market for faculty positions, given the limitations right now with that search. So Jordan?
So I want to add, and this is probably because I know Ginevra has a much more defined research line and well known for the area, and I'm a little bit all over the board. But I think that when I applied for jobs, it's funny that I applied for 30 my first year, 30 or 40 or something like that, because what I was doing is saying I want to be in this geographical area. I want to be 6 hours from this place. And then I didn't know what kind of position I wanted to be in, and I just applied all over the board, and it was kind of I got to go a lot of places. That was fun. But I think now, after having been to one university and now at another university, one of the things that I'm thinking about, or I learned that first time, is there were actually three things that I wanted to look for in my second job, and it was I wanted to be at a place that valued research. I didn't give it a specific number or whatever, but that valued research, a place that there was opportunities for international travel or international exchanges and stuff, and then a place with nice people. Those are my three things. Everything else was tangential. Sometimes I have to like look at that list again to make sure, oh yeah, I'm good. But one of the things that I've kind of realized is that you're gonna live there or live close by. So I'm thinking like, you think about like some of these great researchers at these like universities you've never heard of, or like the university isn't necessarily big, but the person's like made a name for themselves at that university. And I think that's something important to remember, that if it's a place you want to live, sometimes as long as it has whatever your like three things are, I think it's a leap of faith, but I think you can make it work. But anywhere, knowing you have to know what the teaching responsibilities and make sure you have time and all that kind of stuff. But my emphasis now is more, me and my family are going to live in this place. We're going to call this place home. So that kind of trumped the special edness of the institution, I guess you could say. And it worked out this time. So I got lucky, but it's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Jamie, did you have anything to add?
I'm sort of thinking, I think I also got very lucky because I was pretty picky about where I wanted to be geographically. Like my family's here in North Carolina, so it really just worked out. But I did try to cast a fairly broad net and like just apply. I don't think I did cast a somewhat broad net in terms of geography, but I was very specific, and then I wanted to be in an R1. And I also wanted to be with nice colleagues, although you don't necessarily learn that until you get there, right? So I think having those things in mind is really important, and kind of knowing what is truly realistic and thinking about that. So I remember right at the end of my time on the job market, I had one more offer for an interview, and I knew I didn't want to be in that location. So it's thinking about, using resources for another interview, et cetera. And so there's just so much to consider that I always say that I would rather do my dissertation again than go on the job market. Like that's how much I hated it. So maybe I'm not the best person to share, but yeah.
I see a lot of nods with that last statement of how people feel about searching for jobs. So,
and can I just add on that?
Please, yeah.
So when you take your first job, it doesn't have to be the place that you're going to stay forever. In fact, I know quite a few people who after 2 years have gone somewhere else. And that's okay. It's not great to job hop every 2 years, but I think taking that first job, and like Jordan said, it's a leap of faith. If you're moving away from your family or the state you grew up in or whatever it is, moving to the other side of the country, it might not, and it might seem like these are the colleagues, right? This is my research area. This is a perfect fit. And it might not be. And that's okay. Because then you have a feel for, okay, maybe my parameters are changing a little bit. And so I think just don't think that you have to stay in that first job.
Great. Another question, any tips for maintaining your research in a non-R1 institution with a greater focus on teaching? That's a great question. Jordan?
I would say I don't know what I'm in now. I think it's an R1. It's Canadian, so it's R1. It's 70% of an R1, I think. The exchange rate. But I went from a research 2 that had the stipulations of a research 3. What I'm trying to say is that you have to work for the job you want, not the job you have. I mean, like you dress like the same thing. Like no matter, even if the bar was pretty low at my last university, if I would have just rose to that bar, I wouldn't have been able to get a job anywhere else, I think. And that's the thing to kind of be careful about, being lulled into the situation where you are. No, even if your standards are low for publications, I think it's important to know what are the standards for the job that you want eventually. If you don't get it right away, that's fine, but what are the standards and how can I do that? And how you can do it is you're not supposed to do it all yourself. You can join groups, you can write with other people and that sort of thing to help lift each other up. But I think that just make sure you know not only where you are, what the rules are, but what the rules are for the place you want to go to eventually.
Great. That's a great tip from John in the chat about the different hiring cycles that you can check into. And then another question, has anyone been in a position where they love their university colleagues, et cetera, but realize an R1 may be more desirable compared to an R2? I think, Jordan, you kind of alluded to that right then, of working at the status of the job you want, you know, given the parameters, but I don't know if Jamie or Ginevra have anything to add about that.
The two places I've been are both R1, but I don't, if you like the place that you're in, love your colleagues, love the town that you live in, I think that you can do, unless you have a teaching load that's, you know, really hindering you from doing the research. You know, if we dropped here from an R1 to an R2, I really like the place that I work. I love my colleagues. You know, I wouldn't want to move. So I think that as long as you can, as long as you're getting in the research that you want, I wouldn't worry about if it's an R1 or an R2, unless that's the goal for you, to be in that R1. And if it is a matter of your service load is too high or your teaching load is too high, is there something that you can negotiate with your school, with your university, to bring that teaching load down? So if you've got a lot of, you know, publications, or you're doing a lot of research, or you have the potential to bring in grants, maybe you can negotiate that. And I've seen that done in some places. So I don't know. I would really think hard about how much you like the place that you work and the colleagues that you work with, because it's really important. And I think it's getting easier now to work across institutions, even cross country now, because we're getting so used to communicating like this. And there are opportunities for grants across institutions, and, you know, big centers that are cross institutions. So I think there's a lot of work. You can do the work that you want, hopefully where you are.
Great. We are almost out of time, so I don't know if our panelists have anything else, final tips that they want to share, or if someone has a last question that they'd like to get out for us. No? All right. Well, thank you so much. It's been a really great hour. It's gone by really fast. So I really appreciate to our three panelists for sharing their expertise, and for everyone else for joining us today. Jenny, we do have one more coming up if people want to join. Oh, I think you're muted.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
On November, installing because I don't have it pulled up.
Yeah,
13th,
that's why.
Friday the 13th.
Thank you.
Yes. And Liz and the diversity committee coordinated this one. So stay tuned for that. And I'll actually, you can go ahead and pre-register. I'll put it in the chat.
Great. Thank you.
There you go. It's about listening to voices of underrepresented educators.
So great. Thank you so much. I hope to see you all in November. And thank you very much, Jamie, Jordan, and Ginevra, for taking the time today.
Thank you.
Bye.